Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
There she goes again, racing through my brains, and I just can't contain this feeling that
All right. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sid Part 2. Joining me today is...
The Comics Kid 2099.
And a geek for fun.
Indeed. And today we are doing a review topic. We're reviewing a movie that Ruben picked. Ruben, what movie are we reviewing today?
We are talking about the 1993 Mike Myers comedy movie, So I Married an Axe Murderer.
Indeed. And so you said that you wanted to review this, and I couldn't help but kind of flash back to, what was that, The Burbs?
Yep.
Yeah, I couldn't help but flash back to The Burbs where you're like, this is one of my favorite movies. And I was like, this is fucking dull. It wasn't even that it was bad, I was just so bored by it. And so I like, when you said we were going to talk about So I Married an Axe Murderer, I'm like, is this another one of your favorite comedies?
Well, I enjoy this movie. I don't think I would call it I wouldn't put it in my top 5, but I really like it. So now that I've said that, I'm assuming both of you hated it.
I mean, hate's a strong word. I don't care enough to hate it. I mean, so you do find this like legitimately funny. You're legit into it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let me interest you in this other little-known series of movies that Mike Myers did. They're called Wayne's World and Austin Powers. This is such a weird thing to me. The only thing I can think to compare it to, I think the movie's called Love Boat with Adam Sandler. And like, it was just one of his really early career movies, again, right around the same era. And it was just like, just very unrefined. Like they're very aware that it's a low budget movie. Like I remember one joke in that movie was, this is a no budget movie, which means if we want to make the ship like experience an earthquake or something, this is how we're doing it. We're going to take a picture of the ship and shake it in front of the camera. And like, on some level that's funny, but at the same time, pointing out your flaws doesn't make you clever. It's just pointing out your flaws. And just a very unrefined, unpolished kind of comedy movie with the SNL alum. And that's kind of how I feel about this one. And I remember I saw this, once on Comedy Central when I was playing hooky in high school, and like they just play, shitty 80s and 90s comedy movies all day until they get to their original content at night. And that's the only time I'd ever seen this before rewatching it. And so it's kind of like, maybe I was just not sophisticated enough to get all the jokes. And no. So that's my initial impression, at least. Alfie, how about you? Is this like a gem for you?
Well, first things first, I need to just kind of brace myself for a bit because I can't believe we're doing a podcast with someone who played hooky. Ruben, we're hanging out with a bad kid. Like, get geeky gentlemen out of it. We're geeky thugs now.
Geeky thugs. Hashtag geeky thug life.
Like, so this. All right, so I'm like I feel like I'm in like a perfect zen middle ground between you two because at the same time I do not give two shits about this film and what I've watched, and every passing second of fleeting scene is darting away from my head. But then on the other hand, I cannot say I had a bad experience with this because I did kind of have like a knowing, dazed smile throughout my face during all of this. Because Ruben, I feel like every time I see something like this, be it with like Gremlins that we did before, is I'm getting more American culture. It just makes me happy. I just want to give it a head pat because like these are American movie tropes, and I feel like I laughed more at the tropes in this I noticed than actually what was meant to. Like I just for some reason I really like the every time it plays the same song like 4 times. There she goes
She
again.
goes.
I lose my shit at the 4th time that plays. I don't know why. Just and then Charlie, you can't commit to a girl. I don't like commitment. It's like that every time it comes to an American movie. It's just straight guy, lonely, can't get commitment, dating a few crazy girls. It makes me laugh. I can't explain it. It just makes me happy. So I did enjoy this watch, and I can't thank you enough for recommending this so I can talk about it with you guys. But I'm also like, I would have never watched this again. I never will.
All right, so now that you've got your uphill battle to climb, Ruben, what about this works for you? What about this makes it like a comedy movie you really enjoy?
I'm not sure if I have to fight an uphill battle. I think the question I should counter ask is, do you actually like any movies? Because every time I suggest something, you guys are like, oh, this sucks. And I don't know if I should be the one defending myself or if you guys should be the ones like explicitly saying why you didn't like it, other than, oh, it's just boring.
I mean, I'm sorry. I like plenty of movies. It is that thing when it comes down to taste, though, isn't it? Where just there really is no accounting for it because. Yeah, I mean, I kind of came off a little harsh on this, I'll admit, but at the same time, it's not the worst thing I've ever watched. Hell, it's not even the worst thing I've ever watched with Mike Myers in it. It's just, I don't know, this is just one of those movies where, like, I'm actually surprised anyone really remembers it, if that makes sense. It's just, it is such a, kind of blah... I don't know, I feel, I'm trying to think of a way to say it that doesn't sound just insulting, but like, it's just one of those things that like I remember, walking past in video stores all the time and stuff. It's kind of always there, but it's not like the kind of movie that I'd ever really bother to watch. And again, the only reason I ever watched this before this video was because it came on cable one time. So like, do I have any complaints about it that make it like a really bad movie, quote unquote? Not necessarily. I mean, I can point to stuff here and there that's like, okay, that's poor filmmaking. Okay, so spoiler alert for So I Married an Axe Murderer. First of all, the title is a misnomer because he didn't marry an axe murderer. He married the sister of an axe murderer. Secondly, like, it just... If we are to take this seriously as, like, a murder mystery kind of thing, they really blew their load very early and in a very obvious way because, like, they establish the sister character is kind of weird. Mm-hmm. And then, like, we get 1 or 2 little reminders that she exists, and then she doesn't come up. She is, like, literally not relevant to the entire movie except for the scene she's introduced and the scene she turns into the axe murderer. And so it's just like, oh yeah, there's her weird sister in the background just the whole time. So that's a little odd.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think the scene that introduces her, I think you could possibly write it off as they're both a little nervous because he walked in on her in the shower, and she may be acting a little odd because like she doesn't know how to act around him like that. They're both just kind of like awkward about that, and Also, like, I guess maybe because at that point he does. Of course, if you know the title of the movie, you know what the plot is, but he doesn't know anything about any axe murdering yet. So, as far as he knows, this is just your kind of typical like meeting the family and like weird hijinks ensue. But yeah, that's a good point about the like kind of the plot of the murder mystery is kind of laid bare early on if you're thinking about it like a murder mystery, which like the first time I saw this I was young, so I wasn't thinking about like this is how you correctly do a murder mystery and stuff like that. But yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and for me, that kind of comes off a little bit more because, like, I watch so much Monk and Psych and just those USA, like, detective, police procedural kind of things. So I'm just used to the way those tropes are handled, kind of to Alfie's point. It is painfully obvious that it's very formulaic in some ways. But then, like, I don't know, there's other stuff that's just, like, kind of technically bad. Like, you know those tests for characters to see if someone's actually a well-developed character or not?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Mike Myers' character in this, I'm not even going to use his character's name because he's just Mike Myers. What the fuck is his job?
He's a poet.
Like, he gets paid for it?
I think so, yeah.
I mean, it's possible, but that's really not well established by the film.
Well, at the beginning of the movie, the woman who, like, you know, there's that guy who did the semi-autobiographical "I got kidnapped by aliens" thing, and then the woman says, "Coming up next is our very own Charlie McKenzie." I guess maybe he owns a coffee shop, maybe. You're right, it's not especially established, but I think there's enough clues that you could maybe put something together.
Yeah, I don't know, just like, okay, so like beat poetry and stuff like that is not something I'm sure even is a career. Like, yeah, there's like, you know, the Nobel laureates and stuff, the poetry masters that like get, you know, published works out there. That's a career. But they, like, all kind of universally hate beat poets. And so maybe I'm just, like, tipping my head and I don't know enough about the world of beat poetry and the lucrative careers that exist there. Maybe I'm the asshole for that one. But I was just, like, I was sitting there watching this movie and I'm like, you know, he's helping out at the butcher shop. What the fuck does he do all day?
That guy who does that noise, he deserves to have a higher pay grade than that. I lose my scared. Well, the only thing in the movie that makes me fucking laugh every time. Every time I hear that noise, I don't care what follows it. Just hear someone say anything, you'd be like, I need to get my groceries from the store. Like, for some reason, it gets me, man. But yeah, he's just kind of there. It's an excuse to get him to do. It obviously feels like Myers had he had a bit he wanted to do. He's like, I've got a beat comedy bit I want to do. I don't care to justify it. I have to make a living off it for my character. No one's going to care about it. It's a comedy movie. People forget about it anyway. He's just like, this is the joke I wanted to do for the scene. So therefore I'm a poet. Like that seems the amount of thought I was put into this. And I don't think that's a bad thing either for this kind of film. I think like, I feel like we should be critical of it, because I feel that's the best way we can actually get an episode out of this film, because not a lot of interest happens. But if I'm being like 100%, like if I'm being 100% honest, I'm just like, it's not really a big deal.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't really think of it on that way. Like, the what the fuck is this guy's job is just something that occurred to me while I was watching the film, because I found it so odd. It's like, it's one of those tropes that I really, really hate. The person who just has vague career and ridiculous amounts of money. And he doesn't have ridiculous amounts of money here. He's well-to-do. I mean, he's got a nice car. He dresses 90s. You know, he's living the life a bit, but at the same time, it is just like one of those tropes that I've come across that irk me a little bit, so I just kind of took notice of it. But again, it's nothing that like is so wrong that like if I saw it in any other movie, I would hate the movie for it. And so it's not like this is the one thing that makes me hate the film. And I don't hate the film. I just find it so there. It is a movie that exists is kind of the way I'm left with on this film. And to the point you made about like, oh yeah, Mike Myers just has a bit that he wants to. Yeah, I really do kind of see that, and that's generally speaking really poor comedy writing.
Yeah.
It's hard not to just kind of give it to him, because it is probably one of the most memorable things about the movie. I mean, I'll say this to your credit, Ruben. Whoa, man! Whoa, man! I've used that in like day-to-day life. Like I've said that to my wife. Like that's it. That part stuck. So it's kind of hard not to just give it to him. But at the same time, like that's just textbook bad comedy writing. To have something, you know, it's an arbitrary choice, and when you're writing, every choice is supposed to matter. That's just like a real basic thing. And so, yeah, I mean, it technically pays off in that he's able to get the girl back with a poem. But, I mean, that's just like, to Alfie's point, that's just the trope, and it's just fitting this one thing that's unique to the character into the trope. It doesn't necessarily justify itself. And I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I'm just stating that it doesn't.
Yeah. I would also say like, this is kind of like, if you ever watch like a workplace comedy or a workplace drama that's a TV show, you don't care, or you're not watching it for their family life. Or if it's the other way, if it's a family sitcom, you don't necessarily care about what the dad does. Maybe it will come up in conversation, but the meat of the story is what's going on at home. And so I would say here, the meat of the story is his blooming relationship with Harriet, and then how it falls apart and then comes back together and almost falls apart again. And so you might not like that, but that is the core of the story. The story isn't about what he does for a living. And, you know, they probably could have done a better job of establishing it, at least in conversation. You know, like that night where they go on a date after he helps her at the butcher shop, she could have asked him, what do you do for a living? And he could have said, I own a coffee shop, or I'm a poet. And then she could have given him crap for that. Say like, is that actually a thing? You know, something like what you just said. So they could have done more to that. You're right. But I think that they were more concerned with focusing as much time as they could on the two and their relationship.
Right.
Okay, yeah, let's go ahead and go there. Alfie, what do you think of their relationship dynamic?
So just like going, because this was the first time I watched this film, so just going off the title, how I imagined this film was that it was just going to open with them already married, and it would be like a slow reveal, or like the humor would come from situations of being married to someone who is a murderer, and I'm almost kind of wishing we got that, because that'd be
that sounds a lot more fun actually.
Like just, hi honey, just cleaning up the body, all right, I'll be in the toilet. Like stuff like that would be you could have gone with the premise a bit more. But just on this, I guess for the runtime, I think it's a decent, like, okay, so we see the beginning montage, there she goes again. We see the like bliss, and then they have a bit of a breakup, and then they get married. It's like, there she goes again, plays again. We go through that a couple of stages, so I feel like it goes through all the beats of like what you expect of just a film, of like the meet the parents scene, the meet her friend scene, the meet her relative scene, the hijinks thing. I think that was all fine, and I respect that we didn't just rush completely into they're gonna get a shotgun wedding. There is meant to be some passage of time, albeit. So I'll give it that. And I thought the two of them, like, they weren't exactly. a lot of their dynamics just came down to Maya gets the excuse to do a joke and then she just giggles at him constantly and smiles like lovingly. There's not a lot of back and forth there. At least at the start there is, but then that kind of stops. So I can't exactly give it praise, but I'm not exactly going to find fault with it either. I think it did the job. If I do think how I would have done it if we're going to play like Movie Mogul, I think you could get a lot more comedy out of the premise of someone who is a serial killer and go like dark humor with it. And even if they're not actually a serial killer, if you do the serial killer traits they did here, but not the surface, she has swords hanging in her house, like legitimately go with like dark, bleak, this is a psychopathic character, even if she isn't a serial killer, that could be funny in a different way, but I don't know. How did you guys think of that?
Yeah, that title does, it is such a misnomer. And yeah, I could see that premise maybe being a little bit more entertaining, but I tend to be someone that likes black comedy. Black comedy in the 90s was not much of a thing though, so, take that how you will. Yeah, the idea of, like, it's just... The dynamic they have together, I think, works pretty well. Like, their first date night kind of thing is pretty fun. I like the the whole, like, Myers trying to take some responsibility and not just rush into a physical relationship and kind of just trying to get that all out there and everything. And he goes through that really elaborate speech, and he's like, and I think we'll just end up upstairs, kissing upstairs, sleeping together for the night. And she says, I want to sleep together tonight. And he goes, I have absolutely no problem with that. Like, that was a funny line. Myers as a comedian actually ain't half bad. He's hit and miss for me a little bit, but I think one thing that he has a really great grasp of is timing and the understanding of that you can let a joke kind of run for a while, and as long as you keep building on it, it works. That's all over the Austin Powers films. The opening credits to the second Austin Powers film is like just a 3-minute sequence of things appearing in front of where Austin Powers' dong would be, and they're all cock-shaped. And that's funny, and it builds on itself. But at the same time, you're right. Like, it's just, there's not much personality there. It is just like, okay, this is the comedian's excuse to get a bunch of jokes and bits and stuff in. Like when they're laying in bed and he asks her to scratch him and he has his body mapped out.
Yeah, didn't really vibe with that one. I'm not to kink shame anyone here. In case anyone who has the map scratch kink, please comment below so we can share this around and get some traction on it, because I'm open to new possibilities if they are strange and exciting.
Yeah. I don't know, Ruben, what for you about the relationship worked or didn't work, or what was, like, the thing that attracted you most to them?
I guess, and I should point out, like, when I first watched this, I was like, 12. So I wasn't watching it for like this beautiful, two human beings in this wonderful relationship. So that was never my intentional reason for watching the movie, but at the same time, I don't think it's a bad relationship. I think that you don't like the whole, like, it's a guy who's scared of commitment. Okay, but I do like that the conflict seems real. Maybe that seems tired to you guys because that's a thing that comes from real life. Like, I've known plenty of people who are very much like that, and so I think this does a good job of milking. It milks comedy out of that, but it also milks drama out of it too, because spoilers, Harriet is someone who she thinks that she's gotten married like 4 or 5 times, and she thinks that all of her husbands have just left her, and so she's very resistant to she's resistant to moving forward in the relationship. She's not resistant to getting to know him because she likes him quite a bit, but then when it starts to get a little bit more serious, she's a little bit hesitant to jump in. And so I really like the way that was played out. And like you said earlier, you know, taste can be very subjective. So like, I could just sit here and name like all the things about the movie that I thought were funny. But I think they have some legitimately funny moments together in the movie.
I mean, yeah, there are some moments that I got like a chuckle or two out of. I mean, if I'm being completely honest, I just wanted a movie of Mike Myers' friend and his boss that's a cop, but he's like a really nice boss.
Yeah.
That was the funniest shit in the world to me because it's playing on a trope as opposed to playing into a trope. That's just naturally more funny to me. And that's kind of like what humor's all about. Like 90% of humor at its core is about expectation, reversal of expectation. So you've got like the expectation of every fucking movie has like the gruff and tough and rumble police commissioner, chief, what have you, who uses racial slurs and just damn near physically assaults his detectives and stuff. And then this guy's like super nice, and he's like, "Am I going too hard on the racial slurs?" Like, just that whole thing was like legitimately funny and actually had me laughing. And they introduced that pretty early on, and it got me kind of hopeful. But like the other hand of it though is, as funny as that is, it's just there to be funny. It doesn't add anything. And I'm really trying to think if I'm being too critical, because now I'm trying to explain why this movie didn't really work for me. And so I'm trying to like think of examples of comedic movies that tend to follow, you know, a more well-structured, well-written kind of format. Oh, here we go. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Mm-hmm. That's a comedy. That's a romantic comedy, basically. And I mean, to be fair, yeah, Edgar Wright's a much better director than whoever did this. Sure. But at the same time, like, just about everything that's established in that film serves some kind of purpose later on. Sometimes maybe it's a little ham-fisted, but it, you know, you have your setup and your payoff. And so you have the setup here of the police chief that's super nice and the guy wants him to be more gruff and tumble, and we get the payoff where he's coming gruff and tumble. But like, if he was still super nice, does the story change at all? Is it affected at all? And the answer is no.
Right, because he's like an example of how that could maybe play out is, okay, so he's feeling disenfranchised with his job, and his boss isn't what he imagined it, everything's not what he imagined it. So when he starts getting this lead, we kind of get a little bit, so he gets this lead from his friend, is like, oh, maybe you should look into this. He looks into this, and then his boss gets a bit more enthusiastic, and they get enthusiastic together. And maybe how you could play that, instead of it being as obvious as, I'm going to call up people and see if it's the same picture. Oh yeah, that's the same picture. Oh, okay, so she's obviously the murderer, supposedly. Maybe you could have made that a bit more of his mystery, where his boss actually pushing him led him to something he otherwise wouldn't have, whereas it seems like he would have done that anyway, because his boss, like, there was no impact on that, if I think that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of what's getting me about this is, yeah, Ruben, you're right. The focus is mainly the relationship between the two characters, the two main characters, Harriet and Charlie. But really, again, I just feel that this is just a very unrefined kind of comedy movie. And so it's, you know, it gets me a chuckle or two. It's kind of like watching an episode of Family Guy. Like, I could do one, and usually I'm fine. It's that, like, you sit there for an hour and a half of Family Guy, and it's just joke, 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 joke. They'll throw anything at the wall to see what sticks, and that gets pretty tiresome. And it's not to say that like unprovoked or random jokes that don't really have any payoff per se can't work in a comedy movie. I love plenty of comedies that are like that, and Myers perfected that for a time at least in other films he did, like in his Wayne's World series, you know. Wayne's World 2, the joke that still cracks me the fuck up is when they get out to the desert and their spiritual guide is Jim Morrison. And it's because the Doors movie by Oliver Stone was really popular at the time. But at the same time, that shit was really fucking funny when they're like, "Who are you?" "I'm Jim Morrison." Like that, it's a fucking nothing joke. It doesn't have to be Jim Morrison. It's just there to be funny and silly. Like a lot of shit in those fucking movies. Like, there's this rule of writing for screen or page for visual representation that you can't have characters just talk. They need to be doing something, even if it's just going to get a drink of water. And so like there's a scene in one of the Wayne's World movies where Wayne and Garth are having this whole conversation about the plot and what's going on, the conflict of the movie, and they're playing street hockey in the middle of it, and they keep having to move their damn net and say "game on" like every 2 seconds or whatever. And it's random, it's stupid, but it does serve the purpose of keeping what's going on visually interesting. And, you know, again, it's silly, and it kind of adds to the thing, as opposed to, but it's not like the biggest laugh. That's the other thing that's getting me. I get a chuckle, I get like a out of "game on" in Wayne's World. Here, the non sequitur don't really have much to do with anything that's going on in the movie. That's the funniest stuff. And so it feels like watching the plot development, the character arc, that stuff, it makes it feel like a chore to get to the funny bits.
I can see that. What would you say some of the air quotes non sequiturs is? Like the police chief and the friend, that would be one. Because really, I was thinking about it, and like the friend being the cop, and he's, you know, wants to be like Serpico, but really he's just Barney Miller. Like that's pretty much, as far as I can remember, that's the only part of the movie that doesn't have anything to do with Charlie's love life, and that even kind of dovetails with it there at the end when he gets to go on his adventurous cop adventure.
I mean, I really like Stephen Wright in the cop adventure. Stephen Wright's one of those comedians that just... Stephen Wright jokes are the funniest shit in the world. I gotta see if I can get the monotone right. They say the universe is expanding. That'll cut down on the traffic. His shit cracks me up. So him fucking flying a plane, it's like, "Oh yeah. Well, I've never flown at night." Like that's really funny to me. I'll even give Mike Myers like running into a closet with a glass door to get away from the thing he thinks is poison, and then like just there's no way there's that much shit in that closet. Like that was pretty good. Yeah, like it gave me a chuckle or two. There's some other stuff here and there. Alfie, you got a couple that you could name off?
I have no concept of time. that was a good one. Oh,
go ahead.
Like when this is like a small as well. It's just because I know people who sound like this, and this is kind of like a running joke just with me and like members of my family and like other relatives who have this accent, is whenever I hear Scottish accent and specifically the word "murdered," it's just the funniest shit to me. I don't know, because it's the most like no other language, like tone in the entire world can match when a Scottish person says you've been murdered. Like for some reason that always gets me. But again, that's not really inherent to the film. That's more just like a personal thing I'm bringing to the film that makes me laugh. But yeah, there were parts in here where like if you call them out, you can be, oh, that was good. But there's no big laugh out moments for me that seem to be intentional. There's loads of again segmented comedy bits that feels like this was a sketch that was then elongated. Like I Married an Ex-Murder sounds like it'd be a 10-minute sketch that'd be a thing, and then this has been turned into a film, so they've added bits to it from other sketches that they would have done with like I'm a police officer who wants to become a rough and tumble police officer, but I'm doing the desk job. That's another sketch. Like they're all added together to this, it seems. All the Scottish family with like the absolute horrible father. Like, good lord, that is an awful human being. And I was like, when he got set up, because how these like things normally work out is like, okay, so if you're in a black comedy or something, there's normally an asshole character who you're meant to hate, so that when they get killed, you're like, yay, that was funny. He's fine.
And like what's weird is he even gets like an emotional payoff too, where he's like he gets to like talk about how much he loves his wife at their 30-year anniversary, which is weird because like his wife is making out with a cop friend behind his back,
and
nothing ever comes of it.
Is like when he says that, his wife's reaction is like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I was like expecting shocked. Like there was two twist endings that could have like helped this movie in my eyes. Is either A, end the movie that there's both the sister in it and he actually ends up dead, and that's that he just dies at the end. That would have been funny. Or B, his fucking mum's the axe murderer.
Yeah.
You raise a very good point, Alfie, about how this feels like a bunch of sketches that have been stitched together, and from a narrative point, that is a problem. But from a, like, if I just want to look at this as a comedy movie and look at it, and then if the objective is for me to laugh, I don't have a problem with it, because a lot of it does make me laugh, even though you're right. Like, you know, them going to Alcatraz, it kind of comes out of nowhere. It does. It falls into the, you know, what you were saying, like characters have to do something. So they could have just as easily like go to a coffee shop and sit down at one of those outdoor patio cafe tables, and that would have been pretty boring. So like, while all the stuff like my name is John Johnson, but people here call me Vicky, like that line has me roaring with laughter every time I watch this movie. It doesn't have anything to do with the axe murderer plot, but it's still hilarious, I think. And so it does feel like maybe they took a lot of like unused Saturday Night Live stuff and made a movie out of it. But as far as like, if the intention is for me, like I had a crappy day or a crappy week or whatever, I just want to unwind and watch, you know, a funny movie and laugh, then I would say mission accomplished here.
Right, Ruben, but I'll ask you this then. So I can totally see your point, and I'm in agreement with you there. But at the same time, because you obviously like the talent behind this, because you like the humor behind this, you like the sketches, you like the ideas at play here, wouldn't you rather than whatever the runtime of this movie as one big thing with lots of ideas, but the ideas don't really get much room to be played with because they're trying to mix everything back together? Wouldn't you rather have like an individual 10-minute sketch that is just the one thing, and you can put all the jokes into that, and then it's a bit, you're not waiting so long between like the payoff moments, and you can have a real like hearty laugh at like a really, oh, that was a really fantastic 10-minute sketch about a commissioner, rather than, oh, there's little moments of a commissioner in this one film that I like.
No, because I don't buy the premise that you guys are trying to sell, that this isn't a funny movie. Like you guys are saying that it's a chore to get through bits of it, and I still think the relationship stuff here is pretty solid. And I think there's some funny moments there too. Like there's really funny moments in the scenes where, like, you know, they're at the parents' house, and you know, his Scottish father is being horrible, and like the friend is at the police station. Those are funny moments, but I also think there's funny moments in the main A plot also.
Fair enough.
Okay. And again, like, I'm really not trying to sell the premise that this is not a funny movie. I think it's a movie with funny scenes. And I feel like they're so spread out and disjointed. And again, my premise with this just kind of comes back to, this is just a very unrefined film. I'm not sure. You said this was 93? Is Wayne's World 94, if I'm not mistaken?
Possibly. I think it may have come before this.
Really? Wayne's World?
I may be
1992, you're right. Wow. I'm actually legitimately surprised this is not Mike Myers' first, like, feature film. So I Married an Axe Murderer? Yeah, 93. I'm legitimately surprised by that, because it just feels very, like, first time trying to do a movie after you've been doing sketch comedy for years.
Well, and it could be that, because there were other, I think Mike Myers was attached to this after a script had been written. So, like, he came at it, and then he and one of either a producer or director kind of came in and they punched it up a little bit, or punched it down, if you like. But
I mean, I can't imagine what it'd be like without, like, the particular Myers brand of comedy I'm seeing here and there.
I can't either. Apparently, at one point, Chevy Chase was an idea for the main character, and I like Chevy Chase, but I cannot imagine him in this role. It would have been, like, I think definitely, like, the Scottish family I think in real life, Mike Myers' father is Scottish, and I think that him playing his character's father was based on his own father in real life. So I think that that definitely, he brought that to the movie. So there's probably a lot of this that did come from Mike Myers. But I think the basic plot of somebody thinks they've married someone who's a serial killer, I think that was in being formed before he was attached to the movie.
Well, I'm just looking at, like, the creation of this here now, and a lot of it, so, like, apparently it was just formed as an idea of Mike Myers himself was just like, I've been in relationships and I've have friends who are in relationships, and we all think, oh, women are just out to destroy us. That's funny. Let's make a movie about that. And originally, Charlie was meant to be Jewish rather than Scottish. I was going to be more about not so focused on commitment, but more so on just general paranoia of, like, people rather than just commitment to marriage.
And yeah, I think that it's a little stereotypical, but I think that works with, like, the Jewish stereotype kind of comedy. You know, there's your Woody Allen movie right there. Yeah, I don't know. There's stuff about this movie that works, but again, I kind of come back to, it just feels very, very unrefined and just kind of like a an early days thing. Again, I'm very surprised this came out after Wayne's World, because you could watch those two movies back to back, and Wayne's World is one of my favorite movies. Like, not gonna lie, if we're, like, ranking comedies, Wayne's World is probably in my top 10, because it's just very much to my taste. So I actually do quite like Mike Myers. I mean, Love Guru sucked, but hey, like, you know, I do quite like Mike Myers. He's not the best, funniest man in the world, but he gets it. He does an okay job from time to time. And so I don't think that there's anything, like, wholly wrong and awful about the movie or anything. I just think that it is just a movie. It is just there. And so it's that interesting pitfall you fall into of, okay, I watched this thing, I did not hate it, I also didn't particularly enjoy it in any significant way. What am I to do? You know, you're left in that spot of, like, is there anything I can say about this movie that I thought was just overwhelmingly positive? And kind of the more I think about the movie, the more thought I put into it, which I think is fair to say they never really intended for anyone to do. The more thought I put into the movie, the more I'm left with just like, oh no, it's kind of bad on all these different levels, but it doesn't make it a bad movie. It just just is. It's just one of those things that's out there. You know, Hollywood turns out 10 billion movies every year. Of course, not all of them are going to be groundbreaking visions. You know, sometimes people are just doing a movie to make a quick buck, or because they got like a kind of funny idea and all the right people are there at the right time to just get it out there. And sometimes you get great movies because of that. Sometimes you get complete garbage movies because of that. And sometimes you just get movies that exist and kind of work to be put on in the background as kind of white noise.
Right, and I think as well that's like, Ruben, when you're like, so like, we're not gonna retitle this Shadow's name to Miserable Bastards, but like, Ian and me do come off as miserable bastards all the time with this, but I think that's a lot of it is just because when you have something that is not one way or the other amazingly good or awfully bad, if it's just fine, and even the way you're describing this, you're just like, it's not my favorite movie, but I get a laugh out of it, I like it, I think it's funny. Just talking about that and trying to glean something from that in a long form format like Geeky Gentleman, I think invites criticism a lot more than maybe, obviously the film was never intended to be on this channel. So like, it's one of those double-edged swords. Is we're talking about this and getting deeper into it, but the more you get into some deeper, that's something surface level and meant to be enjoyed on a surface level, the more you start poking holes in it.
That's a fair point. And I think, because, you know, if I'm being really honest, like, I do enjoy this movie and I go back to it frequently, but the biggest reason I chose it was I was kind of put on the spot last week. I wasn't prepared with a choice, and so I was thinking, well, what have we not talked about? And I thought, hey, you know, I like laughing, I like watching funny movies, so we'll choose that one. So you're not wrong. Like, whenever you have an hour and a half long podcast and you want to be fair, and being fair means you take the good and you take the bad, that you've got a very good point. You're going to start talking about all the stuff that doesn't work. I just think that there's more that works here than what you guys are maybe giving it credit for.
Is all forgiven, Ruben.
I mean, for me, here's the thing. Okay, if I had just watched this movie because, I don't know, I was at my in-laws' house and it was the only thing on TV, right? If I had watched this movie in that context and, you know, I was talking to you later in the day, Ruben, and you'd been like, so what'd you do? And I go, oh, I've watched So I Married an Axe Murderer at my in-laws. And you'd be like, oh, I really like that movie. What'd you think? And I've been like, it's just all right. That literally would have been my reaction. It's just all right. There was a scene or two that made me laugh. That would have been like solely my reaction to it. It is entirely the format of, okay, let's analyze this movie and talk about it. And I do not think, do you think it's fair to say that this movie was probably never meant to be analyzed?
Probably. I don't think, you know, you were mentioning earlier, like, some movies they just make to make a quick buck, and I don't think this was that. I think they put more of their heart and soul into this, and I don't think this was just a strictly commercial venture, but you're right, this was not high art. They were not hoping to premiere this at the Cannes Festival and, you know, showcase, you know, the artsy side of, you know, you're right, yeah.
And I don't mean to, you know, make a quick buck to like disparage it. I mean, you know, that's kind of the business model for, like, if you like your superhero movies, that's great, but the way that the studios pay for those is with your just like kind of deluge of existent films, like your rom-coms and your just really basic, low budget, relatively speaking, movies that they can make a really consistent profit off of. And that's kind of what this feels like. It's like, okay, yeah, we get comedian, we get girl that was popular at the time, we have them like fall in love, and it's kind of goofy, wacky, and, you know, it earns triple its budget back because all we paid for was generic locations and actors. You know, like that kind of thing. It's just part of the beast, and there's nothing really wrong with those movies in and of themselves. And maybe you're right, maybe this wasn't made just to try to make some money for the studio, maybe it was made because Mike Myers or whoever had an idea, or this was being shopped around, and so, like the stars aligned in such a way that the right kind of people came together that it was able to happen, because Hollywood's also just full of scripts that have never been made, of like all these projects that are supposed to be worked on and just never get done, and maybe this just, you know, someone knew someone who knew someone kind of situation. My point is just, this is a just very average kind of thing. Really, and that's most of what you'll find in this movie's ilk, I guess I'd call it. Like, if you go on, I don't know if anyone even has cable anymore in this conversation or in the world, but if you could just flip through channels on cable till you land on a movie that is just starting, chances are, if you're in the middle of the day, they're not putting their best content on there because they've got to pay to broadcast it. They're putting stuff just because television stations now have to broadcast 24/7, and so they need to find a way to pay for. They need to find stuff to play, and this is kind of the thing that they play because it's cheap and it fills an hour and a half, and that's just kind of what you're left with. It doesn't make it good or bad. It just is. And so, yeah, I come off as negative on it because, yeah, I can't imagine that whoever wrote this wanted it to be like their grand statement that they want someone to analyze. I imagine whoever wrote this kind of had a fun idea and threw it together real quick and was off and on to better and brighter things. I mean, here, this will be fun. So I Married an Axe Murderer, IMDb.
Yeah, I was heading there right now to see what else this guy's written.
Yeah. Alfie, entertain the people while Ruben and I read on the internet.
So everyone, as you can see, I can actually juggle. I'm juggling 6 things at the moment. As you can hear from do. Yeah, that's me juggling. It's fantastic. Honestly, I wish you could see this because almost dropped one there. No, I actually got that one. Can I try 10? Yes, I can. Welcome, dude. This is why you should subscribe to my channel, Geeks for Fun, where I juggle 24/7 on live stream. You can buy my Patreon, and for every $1, I'll add a ball. And we'll just keep going until eventually I juggle so fast and so hard I reach the nexus of reality. And are you guys done yet? Because I
was just really getting into the juggling story. This was written by Robbie Fox. And unfortunately, this guy does not have a lot of credits to his name, and literally, I've only heard of one of these things on its own, though I've never seen it, and one of these things is a sequel to something I saw back in, 2003. So we've got, going from before So I Married an Axe Murderer, we got The Bobby and Larry Show, Shooting Elizabeth, So I Married an Axe Murderer, The Great O'Grady, which is a TV short, whatever that is. And then we got In the Army Now, which is something I've actually heard of but never watched. The Wife and Times of Teddy Berman, TV show from 2008. Playing for Keeps, 2012. And Granddaddy Daycare.
Is that the sequel you were talking about?
Yeah, you never watched Daddy Daycare?
I've heard of it. I didn't know that they were making a sequel. Oh
Correct.
wow. Danny Trejo is going to be in that. Wow. Okay.
I love fucking sequels like that. That sounds like a College Humor parody sequel.
It looks like it too.
I'm the creators of Daddy Daycare, Granddaddy Daycare. He's back.
So I have to say, out of everything that Robbie Fox has written, I've only heard of So I Married an Axe Murderer. So I don't. Maybe this was his where he peaked in Hollywood. I don't know.
Yeah, I've heard of In the Army Now. At first I thought it was the Bill Murray movie, but no, that's wrong. Oh god, it's got Pauly Shore in it and Andy Dick. That's like a double dose of annoying. How do you fucking cast that? Oh, that sounds awful. You know, if we want to review a really fucking like again, if you want to hear me just trash a comedy, we should review Biodome.
Not a fan of the Robbie Fox cinematic universe.
No. Biodome is the Pauly Shore, movie. He gets stuck in a biodome for a year.
I've never seen it. I remember when I was like 12, I met a guy who thought that movie was hilarious, and I've never watched it. So,
and then Ian killed that man.
It's just a really bad stoner movie. I mean, like, that'd be fun to just review like really awful, not funny at all comedies. I'd do that. That'd be mean. Like, then you'd see that I really don't like movies.
I'd feel better morally, because I feel like every time we do this, I make Ruben sad. And I don't like making Ruben sad.
Oh, you guys love it.
No, I mean, there's a little part of me, like, when you posted your video where you talked about, like, oh, I showed one of my friends a movie that I really love, and he thought it was boring, and I couldn't get him to budge the whole fucking time. I laughed my ass off at that. That was pretty fucking good.
Yep.
The thing is, Rube was a good sport about it. Like, I think he was a little shitty at the beginning. He's like, do you guys even fucking like movies? I'm like, oh, damn, we touched a nerve. But I don't know, it's just one of those things. It's like, what can you do when you talk about a film like this? It's like, yeah, it's there.
That's a good point, because like you guys did, this is a movie I will continue to enjoy, but you raised some very good points about it feels like they took several sketches and just kind of threw them together. You're right, I don't think this is a movie that they intended to be. I don't even know if this is a movie they intended to have a lot of rewatch value, especially if you look at everything else on Robbie Fox's career. Like, that doesn't look like a career that, I wouldn't tell my friends that I was a Hollywood writer, because then they'd ask me what I'd written. So, I still like the movie, though. Yeah,
I mean, that's totally fair. Like, it's not a guilty pleasure, certainly, because it's not bad enough to be a guilty pleasure. It's just... I have movies like that it's not a comedy, but kind of a similar thing. The 2002, maybe 2001 remake of The Time Machine with Guy Pearce.
I like that movie.
Yeah, I like that movie too, and I've talked to people about it, and it's kind of not a great movie. It's not necessarily outright bad, but it's certainly not a great movie, but I just like it. It's one of those things I could just watch and I'm fine. Comfort food kind of movie, I guess, maybe is the phrasing to use.
That's probably a really good way to, yeah.
Yeah, that's just kind of the tone I get from it. So I get it. I don't want to like make you feel bad for liking it still. It's fine.
I probably just need to stop choosing comedy movies.
I mean, like, the funny thing is, though, Ruben, you and I have one of the same favorite comedy movies.
Yeah, Kung Pao.
Kung Pao is such a great fucking movie, and I don't know why you and I don't seem to be on the same page for any other comedy movie. It's so funny.
Wait, let me ask you this, because me and Steve talked about Quick Change with Bill Murray and Gina Davis. Mm-hmm. Did you like that one?
Yeah, I remember liking that one quite a bit.
Okay.
It was a bit wacky and strange, and I mean, it's Bill Murray. I don't think that man ever goes wrong.
Okay, yeah. Because I was thinking, I was like, now wait a minute, because there was one we this wasn't a comedy, but I chose that Viggo Mortensen movie, The Road, I think was, or the it wasn't The Road, but what was that movie? That really
that was The Road.
Okay, yeah. I don't think any of us liked that, because I had never even seen that one going into it. I was just like, hey, this looks like it'll be interesting, and I no. And then there was The Burbs, which you didn't like, and then was there another one that I chose other than this one, or?
I mean, you've chosen movies and stuff before. It's kind of like hard to think of. When you said something, I was like, man, what was the last thing Ruben chose? And I kind of tried to go through the videos, but I hit the theme months way too quickly, and so yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But Yeah, it's one of those things. Ruben likes to pick movies that only he likes and do top 10 videos. That's the consistent thing on Geeky Gentleman with Ruben's choices. You did Hellboy, and I kind of liked it, and Alfie didn't like it. And...
Hey! I've been staying. You're in his crossfires, man.
I'm just going through now, trying to find stuff.
Gremlins.
Gremlins.
Yeah. I did not like Gremlins. I think that one was one I thought I think I chose it because it was a holiday movie, and I don't think any of us really liked that one, did we?
No, not really. It had its moments. Again, it's like not actively bad, not particularly good kind of movies. Yeah, and I'm on my phone, so I can't really go back to past a certain point. So I don't know. It's just one of those things. It's interesting to think about. Let's we've been talking a lot about like our feelings about reviewing the movies that Ruben picks. Let's circle back and try to at least end on So I Married an Axe Murderer. So something that is worth talking about in these comedian movies kind of things. How did you guys feel about Mike Myers' performance? Because he's more of an actor, I feel, than a lot of comedians turned actor are. Like, Mike Myers actually can embody a damn character as opposed to someone like, I don't know, Dane Cook. Well, no, that's not fair. I'll give Dane Cook a little credit. Like, Mr. Brooks was good. I'm trying to think of, like, comedians turned actor that, like, don't really... Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy plays Eddie Murphy in every single movie he's in. But Mike Myers doesn't. I feel like Mike Myers is actually a bit of an actor. I feel like this character is a lot different than Shrek, than Wayne, than Austin Powers. I'll give him credit there.
See, I was going to say I'm not much of a Mike Myers fan, and it's not that I dislike him. I was going to say I'm not like a huge fan, but then I was thinking there's a lot of stuff he's done that I really like, or at least that I enjoyed. Like I haven't seen it in years, but I really like the Cat in the Hat movie. That may be an unpopular opinion. I enjoyed that movie.
That's got to be a guilty pleasure.
And if I watched it now, I might be like, ooh, this doesn't hold up. But I liked it at the time. I thought he was really funny. I thought he brought some good jokes to it. I like the Shrek movies that I've seen. I think they could have probably mercy killed that franchise about 5 movies ago, but I liked the ones that I watched. And I like the first Wayne's World movie. I have not watched the second one, and I don't think I've seen a full Austin Powers movie.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
I watched parts of 3 and I enjoyed it. It was at a friend's sleepover, and it was like 3 in the morning, and I just fell asleep in the middle of the movie.
No, that's fair. 3 has my favorite line from any of the Austin Powers movies, which is there are 2 things I can't stand: those who are intolerant of other people's cultures and the Dutch. And it just
my
Michael Caine.
my favorite bit was the have you seen my Dickens, and where it's like a flashback in college where he's reading Dickens, and Austin is naked in the background, and he says, no, it wasn't Dickens, and then he's like, have you seen my Longfellow? And he's like, no, it wasn't Longfellow either. And then it's like, have you seen my Balzac? And that, me and my friend in high school would quote that endlessly. And then the hardest I've ever not laughed was in college in an art class I took, which I regret taking that class because I thought I could just like raise my GPA with it. I ended up failing that class too, so that was hilarious. But the teacher mentioned Balzac one day, and I was biting my tongue trying not to laugh at that.
You would have not survived in any of my schools.
What, did they talk about Balzac a lot?
We talk the amount of British words that are synonyms for penis. Not be underestimated.
Well, that's why the British have that whole stiff upper lip thing going for them, because otherwise they'd just be laughing at all their penis-related words way too often.
I need to go to Great Britain and just like take in all the penis jokes.
I will take you to a tour of a library.
Oh man. Yeah, so I don't know. I quite like Mike Myers as an actor here. I will say, for as much as this is just bit after bit after bit, and it to some extent, this is Mike Myers probably being the most neutral Mike Myers he can be. Mm-hmm. I do feel like the more dramatic scenes that he gets, the more heartfelt kind of Jerry Maguire moments that he gets, those are alright. And I feel like he sells them well enough, and better than someone like an Eddie Murphy would.
Yeah. Have you seen Inglourious Bastards?
Yes.
He's in that too.
Mike Myers is in Inglourious Bastards.
Mm-hmm. He gives the mission to Michael Fassbender's character.
Right. And Winston Churchill's in the corner being anti-Semitic. Right. Okay.
I don't remember Winston Churchill. I've only seen that movie once, so.
Well, it's funny because like they're talking about Goebbels and Winston, and they're like, yeah, and so since they've kicked the Jews into the ghettos and everything, Goebbels has been making his own movies, trying to spread Nazi propaganda, and Churchill just pipes up from across the room, trying to beat the Jews at their own game, huh? And it's just like, whoa.
Yeah.
And that's what I like about that movie. It's just very open about its own bullshit. It's more World War II movies need to be like that, please. Yeah, you're right. I forgot about him in that, and that's like a good sign. It means he's just kind of disappearing in the roles. So yeah, we talked about Mike Myers as the main character. What did we think about Shrek 1.0?
About who? Sorry.
Shrek 1.0, the father character that Mike Myers plays here.
I was entertained. You guys may not have liked. I thought he was really funny. I know yes, objectively speaking, he's a horrible father to the young kid. Like he's endlessly verbally abusing his son. But that's some of the funniest quotes of the movie, I thought.
Right, to me, I'm like, there's a fine line to me. Or there's even, I wouldn't even say it's a fine line because my tolerance for that can get pretty high. I guess it just depends on how it's played or like if there is any just like kind of, I don't know. It's like it's a weird subjective thing, but like sometimes that kind of there's an asshole just being an asshole, and it's funny seeing an asshole being an asshole, especially when they're exaggerated. That can work a lot of times. So like fucking hell, one of my favorite characters is J. Jonah Jameson. Is basically that. So I can't exactly pinpoint why this guy didn't work for me, but maybe it was the delivery, maybe it was just the accent being put on like very thick, or what. But I don't know. This guy just didn't feel. I didn't laugh at anything he said personally. It was the mum made me laugh more than the dad, which is like surprising. He was just kind of there and mean. It was kind of just like, oh, okay. Because I think it's because I know people like that, and it isn't funny in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily have a problem with the way he was written. I've seen Mike Myers do this better.
Yeah.
Before I saw this movie is the thing. And then obviously not just this time, but the first time I ever watched this movie. Like, I saw this post Fat Bastard and post Shrek, and both of those over-the-top Scottish performances are just funnier than this.
Well, you could also say maybe that he was like evolving into that, because both Shrek and Austin Powers were like late 90s, and this was early 90s, so he was still, you could say still
definitely
like honing it. Apparently that character is based on a character he did on Saturday Night Live. Like virtually the same character, just different last name.
Okay, that would make sense. Yeah, I don't know, like it is really just because I saw it better, it's like, I'm trying to think of a good example of it. You watch a stand-up comedian tell a joke on stage, and it fucking kills. Everyone in the house cracks up at it. And then that stand-up comedian gets their own show, and then they they build a sketch or a scene in the show around the joke, and it's not as funny. George Lopez is like kind of a B grade comedian to me. He's not like great or anything, but he gets me from time to time. He did this just hilarious bit about someone coming up to the drive-thru and just the whitest person and ordering, and then they go, "What kind of fountain drinks do you have?" And it just, the audience cracks up at just the question, and then he goes into his like over-the-top accent. He's like, it's stupid. What the fuck's a fountain drink? Just talking about like not understanding and kind of going back and forth. Like, what's a fountain drink? Sodas, like Coke. That's why did you say that? And like the whole audience just loses it. And then you watch an episode of George Lopez's show, and they set up the scenario where George Lopez is in the drive-thru, and he says, "What kind of fountain drinks do you have?" And the context has changed, and everything's changed, and you're watching it on your own, or maybe with just one or two people in your house, and it's not as funny. It's just everything about that, like that's the kind of thing. It's just when you see the proper version of it, when you see it at its best, seeing it readapted or reworked or not quite as refined, it loses you. That's kind of how I feel about the Scottish character here.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're at about that 110 mark, which is where we need to be. Does anyone else have anything really pressing they want to talk about with this one?
Apparently, the lady who played Harriet accidentally cut off part of her finger in the scene where they were in the butcher shop.
Shit.
They got it sewed back on, but apparently she was distracted by something Mike Myers was doing, and she wasn't paying attention to the butching, if you will. And
the butching?
I don't know.
To butch! Lesbians are really into it.
Yeah. So anyway, that I guess she bled for this movie, you could say.
Well, I mean, if you're trying to do, you're working with knives and you're trying to act a scene, and then you corner of your eye, Mike Myers is fucking a piece of meat. Like, I don't blame her. Hard to focus when that shit's going on in the background.
Yeah.
I'm just like shocked that they had actual knives and actual meat on set. That just breaks every rule of set design I've ever heard. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you give them an actual knife, but you make sure it's dull as could be, so that they're basically just handling a triangular shaped piece of flat metal or something. That kind of just screams pretty low budget to me. All right. Well, I think that'll about wrap it up then. Let's go ahead and go on to ratings. Ruben, I'm going to ask you to do 2 just because I'm curious, but you can go last. Alfie, why don't you go first?
All right. So I feel like a good quote for this thing I just looked up while I was reading for it is Roger Ebert kind of summed up everything I think we've done here, is where he just says, this is a good movie trapped inside a mediocre one. And I think that's pretty clear. I think that it's a good idea. I think you could do something with the premise. I think a lot of the ideas at play with, yes, there may be tropes, but everything's a trope basically, and it's about how you execute it. So I don't think that inherently is bad. You can do stuff with the premise. I wish they could have gone a bit further with it and really gone to black humor and would have made it stand out a bit more from the, like, if you set it up as a generic rom-com thing and then you go like real like dark with it and maybe get a bit more gory elements into it just for the real black humor, I think it would have become a little bit more of a classic, or maybe just that because being weird and more out there. But yeah, I don't think this was. It's not something I'll be rewatching, but I don't regret watching it either. So I'm gonna give it a 3.5 severed fingers out of 5.
All right. I feel bad kind of going a bit lower on it. I thought you and I were on almost the same page, Alfie, so I'm surprised you went that high. I'm going to give it a 2.5 out of 5 because that is literally average. So I'll give it 2.5 out of 5 closets with just an impossible amount of things up in the top that are just very precariously placed.
Yeah.
All right, so Ruben, I want you to give 2 ratings. I want you to give the rating you would have given to this movie before this conversation to the best of your ability, and if it's changed, the rating you'd give it now.
Okay. I would say before this conversation, I would have given it, hold on. I can't think of an item in the movie. 4, dang it. I don't know, 4 stereotypical Scottish accents out of 5, I guess. And then after hearing you guys kind of talk about it, I do think the movie is a little problematic because of it being a series of sketches stitched together. So I would say it's still being a very amusing movie for me. I would say that brings it down to about a 3. I would say a 3.5 or a 3 stereotypical Scottish accent. So it doesn't bring it down much, but I think it does come down a little bit because of that.
No, that's understandable. I was just curious if the conversation did change your opinion on the film at all.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those things, like, again, even if it is a bad movie, which I don't think it is, you can still fucking enjoy it. Like, that's the thing that gets me about people, is like, oh, turns out this movie sucks, therefore I can't ever watch it and enjoy it again. No, if you're not aware of the flaws in a movie, becoming aware of them doesn't destroy it 9 times out of 10. I can think of very few movies where, like, I became aware of something about it through discussion or research or whatever, and it drastically altered my perception of the film. Oddly enough, one of them was Nosferatu, so that was kind of interesting. All right, so that does it for this episode. Alfie, we need a discussion topic for next episode.
Right, and for this one, I don't know, maybe I decided to feel a bit more existential or a bit more Dr. Crane-ish, but next time I want to talk about fear.
Okay.
Yeah, it's scary.
That's broad. I like it. I like this. This is why you got to get the young blood on the podcast. They're not afraid to tackle the big topics. They have absolutely no idea what they're talking about with. It's great. Sweet. I'm excited. This should be a fun one. All right, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
I'm the Comics Kid 2099.
And I'm a geek for fun.
And we are your geeky gentlemen. And we will be discussing things.